All right, here we go. Welcome back, everyone.
Yeah, I don't even think there's anybody in here yet, but
There isn't.
might as well just get started. Should we talk about our latest adventure?
Yeah, so we were just on the North Shore of Oahu, and the Aloha Classic wrapped up here on Maui, the windsurfing event, and both Ridge and I did the Sunset Beach Pro. So it's always fun to do events on the North Shore of Oahu because it is the proving grounds, and you really got to surf above and beyond to make an impression there. So that was really fun being over there. And we also got to film a really cool interview with Rush Randall, which will be coming out hopefully next week. And this is my favorite time of the year, winter. We haven't had a jaw swell yet, but at least there's like the potential of it happening.
I mean, we got some pretty big waves at sunset, I'd say. It was one of those days. It was, what'd you say, like 12 feet?
Oh, totally.
That was the biggest waves I've seen all summer, or like since last winter, for sure.
That was 8 to 10 foot sunset with the occasional 12 footer. At least in my heats, it was 8 to 10 foot. And I think in the later heats, the afternoon, it was bombing. It was 12 foot. We went down. We were staying at the New Earth Project house, which is right across from Pipeline. And there was too much sand on the reef. And I haven't surfed there yet again. So I wasn't looking forward to hitting some backwash and getting clamped on for the first session. And I kind of forgot my helmet because I figured I wouldn't be surfing pipe if I was competing at sunset. But you remember how gnarly pipe looked? It was like, I would say there was one good barrel, and it was either Koa Rossman, Eli Olsen, or Jamie O'Brien on it. And then the rest was like 100 bad closeouts, like could totally send you to the hospital.
It was double black diamond for sure. I think I spent a total of like 10 hours that trip just sitting there watching. It's like I literally look up YouTube videos of like raw Pipeline, and it was trippy to be able to just have that in person.
Damn, we should have just filmed 10 hours of raw Pipeline and posted it.
It's true.
It's kind of something mesmerizing about it. There's a lot of like stuff going on the beach. Like most places you go to, it's like people sitting on the beach, but there's like a full on, I don't know, there's just so many walks of life on the beach. There's like a tide pool with a bunch of kids and dogs playing, that one 10-foot pipe wave coming, it could sweep them off. Lifeguards are constantly going up and down the beach, trying to tell people to stay back because the current's so strong. I'd say for not the accomplished swimmer or surfer, it's easy to drown because it just sweeps you out and down the beach. And then there's influencers getting their photos in front of the waves with the palm trees. And then there's a lot of girls that are just hoping to get picked by one of these houses, I swear.
It kind of seems like it,
it's so true. Like they park themselves right in front of like either the Volcom house or what used to be the Quicksilver house, or, any one of them. And to each their own. It's funny. It's just, that's how the North Shore is.
It's such a scene.
It's just its own ecosystem. You feel like you're in this crazy bubble. And I mean, for good reason, because it is probably in that stretch of beach, the best waves that close together in the entire world.
It's pretty shocking just being so used to hearing we have just Hokipa. We're used to just going to that one spot every day, surfing, windsurfing there.
Well, we've said it before, though. We've said it before. Maui has the best waves on planet Earth that never break.
They just don't break. Yeah.
Oahu has the best waves on Earth that always break if there's a swell.
I know. So it was just like, it's mind-boggling to go there and then realize there's other waves other than the one that's right in front of us at the pipe house. Like we were going all over the North Shore, surfing a ton of different waves. Mostly like we surf by ourselves a lot.
It's
at
funny.
Kind of the lesser known waves. It's so sick.
If you're on the North Shore, Pipeline's always going to be crowded. Sunset will be pretty crowded if there's no competition, but it's a spread out lineup, so you can really pick off waves. Velzy Land is always packed, usually with Groms and, kind of locals and stuff. And then there's all these waves, though, in between from Haleiwa all the way pretty much to Turtle Bay. There's waves in between the really famous waves. Like next to Rockies, there's a wave called Monster Mush. The next to there is called Gas Chambers and Pupukea. So, like, those waves can get kind of crowded, but, like, you could drive up on a good swell where everyone's focused on the main good spots and basically be surfing by yourself world-class waves. And we did that one day, like, Sunset Comp, I made my heat, and we decided to go do some more training with our friend Doug Silva, and we went to one of the waves that are just off the side of the road, and on a bigger swell. No one's out there. And we ended up surfing like some of the cleanest, most perfect right-hand peaks.
So fun.
I'll just say, because I don't want to blow it out for anyone. I don't want to get in trouble, but it's between Haleiwa and Waimea Bay, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Yeah, that session, you guys went out first, and then when I was paddling out, I saw a lone board floating in. And right at that time, everyone that was coming in was saying, whoa, the swell just doubled. Like, it was getting so much bigger so fast. Like, it was probably 6 feet right before we paddled out, and by the time we got out there was a couple,
Dude,
8, 10
that
foot
reminds
sets.
me of that legendary big wave story from back. It might have been in the 60s.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. That whole, I know exactly what story you're gonna tell.
But
tell
it was
That's a good one.
who was it again? It was I don't know why I'm blanking on the names at the moment. I'm gonna have to look it up sometime in this podcast.
Wasn't it like Dickie Cross or something?
Well, Dickie Cross, and then
was one of them.
Yeah. But it was a legend. Oh, would it Woody Brown maybe?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Oh no, not Woody Brown. It was and it was one of it was a.
But it was in Riding Giants. They referenced the story, right?
Okay.
Wasn't that the movie?
I feel
So
bad
if
not
you want the
remembering
full
it, but it
story,
was from the 60s, and they were surfing Sunset Beach, which after surfing Big Makaha, that was the original big wave spot, and then Sunset Beach became the new big wave spot because no one would dare go to Waimea. That was like too much on another level, and they were out surfing, no leashes, in the 60s. I mean, no one was on the North Shore probably. It was probably just completely empty out there, and the swell came up really quick, and Ridge, just as well as I do, you could be on the North Shore and it could go from literally 4 foot to 20 foot in one set. All the outer reefs will start breaking. It'll just happen. Even with swell forecasts, like, okay, at some point today's gonna get big, but it goes from 0 to 100 really quick. And obviously back then they didn't have forecasting, they didn't have lifeguards, they didn't have anyone looking out for them. They were at sunset, and it got too big to get in. The whole Sunset Beach was closing out. I mean, it might have been just a Waimea jaws swell or something. It might have actually been the Eddie Aikau size swell, because they ended up having to paddle from sunset in the evening, because they did an afternoon session, all the way to Waimea Bay, which, I don't know, that's probably like 4 miles, maybe. And there's nowhere to go in between those two places. And everyone had always thought that Waimea Bay was too deep for it to break and it would always be open. But this was the early days. No one really knew much anything. And they came around and there was full closeouts at Waimea Bay. And for them, there was nowhere else to go. I think like maybe back in the day, the waves used to close out down even all the way towards Haleiwa, because I don't even know if there was a harbor there yet. That'd be interesting to kind of look up. But anyway, their only other option would maybe be to go all the way down to Haleiwa. But I think at that point it was almost dark, and then you have all those outer reefs like alligators and Himalayas, and they didn't really know what was down there too. So they might have been screwed regardless where they tried to come in. But Waimea Bay, they get there, huge set closes them out, and one of them got washed up the beach. I think it wasn't Dickie Cross. Dickie Cross ended up drowning. They never found him. Board gone. I think it was Woody Brown. Might have gotten washed up on the beach without his shorts, just completely naked. He somehow survived. But that's what added to that lore and legend of Waimea Bay, because now everyone was extra scared of going out there, because if you went there, you would die. You'd get sucked into, a hole, basically. Or they probably thought there was huge sharks there too, because it is pretty deep water. I have to look this up.
Yeah, I was literally thinking that as we were out there and the swell was building, I was just thinking about how easy that could happen, especially back then where you can't forecast. And I remember right when we pulled up, so I was paddling out, and this story specifically reminded me of the one you just told.
Oh, it was Woody Brown.
Oh, it was Woody Brown. So which ones did Woody Brown survive?
No, we said so. Woody Brown got washed up the beach. Whoa, no way. Yeah, it was Woody Brown got washed up the beach naked, and Dickie Cross was never seen again. And I think they were like 17 or only 18 years old, which seems wild now. 17-year-olds are still kids,
I know.
So I'm like, oh my gosh, that poor kid, like, that's so crazy. That is just so, yeah, but so we should go back to the story. about when you saw that lost board, because it has a funny angle from my perspective, because I think I did see the guy that lost it, and he was all bombed out the back. And
Yeah,
I mean,
so
not a
I'm
lot you can do when you're duck diving 12 foot and 12-foot Hawaiian. So it's like 25-foot faced waves coming in. And luckily there was a lifeguard. There was a jet ski with lifeguards on it. So it was like, oh, don't worry. They're going to come and get you. Like, just wait a second. And I think did the current end up taking him all the way over to the other?
Yeah, so there's basically, just to set the scene, there's two breaks. There's a right, which I was trying to go out and surf with you guys, and then there's a left. And the current basically comes out through this channel and goes straight through this left. So you can't really escape it. If you're in that area, you almost have to get pounded in or catch a wave, and that's how you could get in. So what happened is this poor guy, I think he might have been at the right. Anyway, his leash broke, and I'm paddling out, and I just see a lone sort of mini tanker floating in. And usually, like what we do if someone loses their board, I just ditch my board because I'm wearing a leash, and then I hop on his, and I'm paddling out, and I just see his head, and I'm like, okay, I'll get there in a second. But what I didn't fully realize is he's just trapped in this current going out to this left.
So
and
fast, faster than you could even paddle, right?
Yeah, and there was a lull, so like the current was extra ripping. There was no waves. So I'm just paddling as hard as I can. I'm like, I need to get to this guy right now, or else we're going to be in the impact zone. And
you
by the time
can't hold his board because it's probably a big board, right?
Oh, yeah. No, so I got to him before the next set. So it was a big lull, and I handed him the board, and he was he wasn't panicked or anything. He was doing pretty good. I'm sure he's like really well versed.
It's more like, I wonder,
types of waves.
I mean, I bet you it's one of those things. It's like how we feel. It's like, oh, it's fine. I'm fine. But it's just such a major inconvenience. So like, I have to swim in. My board might be on the rocks. So, you're just like, oh, and you're stuck in a current. Okay, this is going to take an hour versus like 2 minutes if I was in the impact zone.
Oh, yeah. So he was like, at first he was stoked because he got his board back. But we just both look out, and there's just 10-footers.
Did he lose his board
stacking.
again?
I don't know what happened to him.
He just disappeared forever. No one knows.
I basically took a 10-footer, maybe a 12-footer straight on the head, and I was just getting smoked, and I was underwater.
He was just in trunks, right?
Yeah, and I came up, and he was gone, so I was hoping he somehow belly rode it in,
He probably did.
Yeah, but then the lifeguards were coming around looking for him, but I think he made it in fine. But then I had
You'd have heard about it on the news if he never did make it, and someone would have reported him like missing.
Yeah. But so I was like, okay, now I'm like at this left. This is not where I want to be. I wanted to be surfing with you guys. It's like maxing out at this wave. It's way too big. And I basically, just for someone that doesn't know what to do in that type of situation, when you're in a current going out, you basically just got to give in and get smoked in. So I just stayed in one spot.
You either got to get smoked in, or you have to go way out with it and then like get out of it and paddle in on the other side, which takes a while.
Yeah, so I got smoked in. I was fine. I'm gotten luckily pretty used to it. So it just took me a while. It was more just annoying. I had to paddle all the way back inside and around, and then I finally got out to you guys. But my poor girlfriend Sarah was on the beach, and she had no idea what happened to me because she was filming you and Doug, and she was expecting me just to be out there in 5 minutes, and I'm just nowhere to be seen because I went on this side quest over to this completely other way.
Well, that's where it brings to my side of the story from this, because I came in because I was trying thrusters and I was swapping to quads and for my new step-ups that I had made, and I was trying to figure out which one I was going to use in my next heat at the comp, and I come in, and both Sarah and Scott, who was with us, they were basically like, have you seen Ridge? Have you seen Ridge? We can't find him. And I'm like looking around, and the spot we were at, for maybe most, would be pretty gnarly, but for us, it was like the softest wave you could find on the North Shore, I felt like,
it was pretty mellow.
And I was like, they were kind of worrying me too, because I'm like, yeah, where is Ridge? But then at the same time, I'm like, gosh, there's no way this would be gnarly for him. Even if he lost his board, like you wouldn't think twice. But then again, you're like, oh, well, on these sort of like days, that's when something happened. Maybe did he hit his head? Did someone's board hit him paddling out? I was trying to think about it, and I was like, you guys are really overreacting. And then the lifeguard ski came up and is going in and out, buzzing around, and they pick someone else off the beach, another lifeguard, to be like a jumper. And they're like, Sarah's starting to freak out. Sarah, for everyone, is a sweetheart, but she's from Norway. So she's not
so used to it.
I wouldn't say she's not used to the idea that, okay, it's the reef's kind of far out, and it might take a minute to get out there, and you do get stuck in a current here and there, and there's a lot of swell. You can't see in between the waves. So I could see that she would have been probably pretty freaked out. But luckily, then finally you appeared from, where the left was over towards the right. And I'm like, look, he's right there with Doug. Okay, I'll see you guys out there. And
yeah.
And then I think the next funny part of that whole session was when we were trying to catch a wave in, and it kept getting bigger and bigger. And our friend Doug Silva was out there, and he hates big waves. Absolutely hates big waves. He's really good in big waves, but he hates big waves. And he'll admit it. He's a small wave surfer. And Ridge, can you remember when we were like sitting there and we were all trying to catch a wave in, and this 10, maybe 12 foot set.
It was the biggest set of the day for
25 foot faced wave, top to bottom. And Doug is like, sees it. He's like, doesn't want anything to do it. So he tries to catch an insider. We're riding step ups. I'm on a 6'4". You're on a 6'4". He's on a 6'9". And he paddles, and Doug can catch just about any wave in the ocean. He's really impressive in that way. And he ended up paddling. I'm like, oh, he for sure has it. And then we're paddling. Me and Ridge are paddling out, and all you hear is just this screaming of, ah! Because he misses the wave. And now he's like in the pit, right where the wave is going to literally land on his head. Like, had he just paddled with us, he'd probably make it through, but he was trying to catch a wave in. And that sent me into this hysterical laugh, because I know Doug could handle it. He's going to be fine. But it was just the reaction and just like your thought for your friend, like, oh my gosh, he's about to get destroyed. And it is kind of funny, especially when you're...
It was pretty funny, yeah.
Pretty funny when you're comfortable. And I probably could have caught that set if I wasn't laughing so hard and like about to drown, because I was like paddling and laughing, and when you're laughing, you can't even breathe. So
I saw Doug, I assumed Doug got that first wave, because I was right next to him when he paddled in, and I immediately went over it and saw that thing, and I was scratching. I think I made it like it landed on my feet and then pushed me through.
Yeah, it was luckily, a big wave.
I was scratching. I don't want to get caught by that thing. Now we surf big waves and stuff, but it's never not inconvenient to get smoked. It's never like that fun.
Well, that's the thing.
You kind of want to avoid it no matter what.
And then you have so much experience getting pounded. You're just like, oh, I've kind of been there, done that. Like
just going through the motions.
You're just like, okay, and it's just more like whatever. And then also too, we're in the contest, and we don't want to break our boards that we're testing for the contest. Like, very easy to do on the North Shore, but Doug ended up getting washed in, and I think we both got a pretty fun one in after on the tail end of that set when we finally got back to the peak, because the peak had moved probably 50 yards farther out. But yeah, that's just, oh gosh, every time we go to the North Shore, there's always something funny, It's like there's so much going on there. It's crazy.
It's usually funny because of your surf coach and our friend Doug Silva. For those that don't know, maybe you should give him a little rundown of who is. He's a legendary guy now. He had Stab articles, superstar coach of Seth Moniz.
Yep, exactly.
Tell us about him.
Well, Doug was a champion amateur surfer, and he was incredible in his day. He'd beat some of the best guys, even go toe-to-toe with Kelly Slater, and he could have probably been, at his time, a world champion in surfing, but he decided to become the party world champion. And if you asked him, he was probably the 12-time party world champion, because that's one more than Kelly's 11 titles. And him and Kelly's relationship's awesome, because they grew up with each other since they were kids, but they're definitely like brother siblings. So they give, like, Kelly rides Doug pretty hard, and then Doug tries to give it back, and it's really funny. That being said, Doug is a really good surfer, and now he's helped Seth Moniz do really well on the championship tour. When I was transitioning from just doing windsurfing, kind of stand-up paddling, and I wanted to get better at surfing, because I've always surfed, but needed some adjustments, because I went from riding really big boards to try to ride small boards. It's a different technique. And Doug was somebody that I had met surfing at Ho'okipa. He was coaching someone else, and we just sort of hit it off. And I would say beyond a coach, he just became a really good friend, and now we just really enjoy each other's company. And he'll caddy for me and, a bunch of these other amazing surfers out at Sunset Beach or at any event. So he's just a really good, knowledgeable friend to have, and he has the North Shore wired. He's been out there for, as you'd say, 100 years, even though he's like, I think he's in his mid-50s, but solid guy, huge heart, incredible surfer, incredibly fit for his age, just like six pack. And he likes to have a lot of fun, but he's a character extraordinaire. You know, he fits into that North Shore so well. And so, yeah, he's always fun to be on the North Shore with because, you know, he hates big waves. I love big waves. And, you know, I think we enjoy the comedy. You always get him into
crazy situations.
Yeah, usually I can like convince him to go out when it's a little bit bigger, and then I try to calm him to wave. And funny thing is, Doug and I, our sunset, we've collided a few times surfing, like bad, because we like to do crossovers. And the last time we did it was for the Sunset Pro for the WCT. It was like, wasn't last year. I think it was the year before. And we were out surfing, and Sunset Beach, there's guys that'll ride a 9'4" gun out the back. And, you know, in a competition, you're riding pretty much a 6'6", maybe a 6'8", most times 6'6", sometimes a 6'4". And it's so hard to get a wave out there when there's 50 guys out and most of them are on big wave guns. And, you know, it's a big wave for sure, but you can still catch it on a smaller board, and that's what you need to ride in order to get points in these competitions, because that's what they judge the best. So basically, we were trying to catch a wave in. I dropped in deep. I was like taking off deep, and then Doug was going, but I didn't see him because there's so much spray, and in the morning there's that offshore light, and you just get blinded. And I basically dropped in, bottom turned around him, and started to turn the other way, and then we just collided. I didn't even see him coming. It felt like getting hit by a car. His fin went through between my toes through the deck of my board. I had to get the deck of the board fixed. Somehow it didn't cut my toe. I don't think a video exists, but everyone on the beach saw it, which is funny because it's a quarter mile out. We hit so hard, I literally rang my bell. I felt like I got punched by how I would imagine Mike Tyson would hit, because here's like a 165-pound, 175-pound man going 30 miles an hour down a wave, and we just go boom, two opposing forces, and he hits me so hard, his tooth breaks and goes out his cheek, blows through his cheek, and I swear, like, he was almost drowning. I thought I was about to like get knocked out, and then I like pop up, and I just see a hand, and he's drowning. And Doug is classic because he likes wearing this giant medallion that already breaks his teeth out, but it's called the wave magnet, and so that thing's drowning him. And I basically have to help him get on his board. He doesn't know where he's at, and we go in, and we have to go to the ER together, and they're like, "What happened to you guys?" We're like, "Oh, we collided surfing." Everyone's like, "What? How do you do that?" Because, you know, it's really fun to do crossovers, but like, if everyone's not perfect in line, you could just run into each other. And after that, we made a decision, because we had collided into each other before trying to do crossovers and just kind of maybe being a little too comfortable, playing it too close. And so now we don't ever catch a wave in together ever again. I would rather just paddle
Makes sense. Yeah, makes sense.
It was right before this big competition too, first wild card there, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, am I going to have like a severe head injury right now before going into this event I'm trying to train for? And the joke
was... Your coach just gives you a concussion.
Yeah, the joke is the coach gave me it, and, you know, whatever. It was funny, though. It's all good story now.
Yeah. Walk us through your event, because during the event, the announcers and everybody was saying that you were sort of looking like the in-form guy. But just walk us through what happened, because it was a pretty good event stories. You were ripping.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, I've Sunset Beach, I've always had a really great relationship. I've won a ton of stand-up paddle events out there. And the nice thing about being on a stand-up paddleboard is you can get between all the peaks at Sunset really fast. So there's really no wave you can't miss. When you're surfing, you're so low, you don't see the waves till they're kind of closer. And you end up having to kind of choose a peak. So it gets a little tricky. Like, positioning is the most important thing at Sunset Beach. I have it pretty down. I've learned a lot from Doug on the surfing side out there. And I always struggled, though, like with my boards out there. I've gotten some insane boards from people, just your standard step ups. But, you know, once I started shaping for myself, I kind of just was able to shape for exactly how I surf and what I need. I'm not sure if it would necessarily work for everyone else, because it's wildly different than what most people are surfing. And that might sound surprising, but I'll give you a little bit of a breakdown. It's like The nose kick is a lot more extreme than most boards. The rails are very soft all the way back to the fins, which is a little bit different. You know, the legends like Takoro and Eric Arakawa, and I would say even like the Pizels, and then of course the KTs that I've been riding. The tradition is to have that tucked edge a lot farther forward, and that's for release and speed, and probably just to make it feel a little bit lighter on the water. But I wanted these rails to really hold to go through that chop. I got the board glassed, basically 6.6 on the deck and 6 on the bottom. So actually pretty heavy compared to what most people do. Most people might do maybe 6.4 and then 4.4 on the bottom. Like that might be a heavy glass job. And then again, these are all professional surfers, so they're getting like comp light boards for big waves. But when you have a board that light, it can chatter and be bumpy. And so I did a lot of these things. My board wasn't a pintail, it was a swallowtail. I wasn't riding a thruster, I was riding a quad. The quad that I've been able to develop with MFC for the 4x4. It's going to be coming out soon, hopefully. But, you know, there's a lot going on with those fins. They're basically windsurf fins or inspired by, and same template I use out at Jaws too. So vertical fronts, a little smaller, swept rear fins with twists. And so there's a lot going on there. That being said, I made the board so that it would allow me to do the surfing I want to. So instead of waiting for the sweet spot on that wave to bottom turn, I could bottom turn anywhere. And I could turn anywhere on the top. And once I had that board under my feet, I felt like I just needed to be on the right waves. And I was doing really good. I won my first 2 heats. I was finally getting scored 7s. And for a while, it was so hard to get over a 5. And it could have been just my surfing. And I think that goes into sort of a bit of the tale or the process at which I think I've been able to get better at surfing. And it goes hand in hand with all sports. Most recently, windsurfing too is like, for me, I have the ability to surf really decent, but at the same time, I could get a lot more out of my performance with equipment. And maybe because I do so many sports, I don't spend the same amount of time or as much time as like the dedicated North Shore kid who is surfing out there, you know?
For sure.
And so I'm not adapting to my equipment as much because I don't have time necessarily. And that's a time thing. When you get a board and maybe you don't shape it and you don't, and your style doesn't totally fit it, you have to adapt to it. And once you adapt to it, you do the most insane surfing, and it's the best surfing in the world. And that's what we see, because there's really no one on a world tour level right now. I don't think there's not one person that's shaping their own boards for them. And maybe it's just too hard and they got to focus on competing. But back to sort of the point, I was able to get my level a lot higher up once I was getting boards exactly what I wanted. Because no matter what, I had to take a bit of a risk for my shaping and not copy anyone else's stuff. And most people, or most shapers, they kind of see what everyone else is doing, and you take a little bit of that and you sprinkle this in there, and the base of it is pretty much the same. So everyone's riding nearly the same board, with the exception of maybe the Pizel Ghost is very separated from tradition. That's John John's board, which is wide point forward, narrow tail, pin tail, and you ride smaller fins on it, smalls or mediums, thruster, and it has a double concave through the whole thing. So it's very different, thick in the nose. It has the outline of a 6.8, but it might be a 6.3. And so that's maybe the most wild board out there. But I ended up losing, and it was in the last 15 seconds. I was winning the heat.
That was brutal.
And, that's the thing with Sunset, though, is like it's really, really hard. If you catch one wave, that puts you out for about 5 minutes because you ride it in, you might get caught inside a little bit, paddle all the way back out to the peak. And so the waves in this heat were really out to sea, and it was hard to pick a good one. Very easy to get caught inside because it was 8 foot with some good 6-footers, and then there would be a 10 to 12 footer coming in. So where you had to catch a 6-foot wave, that's where the whitewater would be for the 10-foot wave. And you couldn't wait for the 10-foot wave because there'd only be one per heat. And, each heat, let's say, is like 25 minutes long. And so you basically, have to just play the game and just catch 2 good waves. And you usually get one really good one and you're stoked. And then you might get a bad one. And so that sort of happened to everybody. I couldn't hear anything from the beach. It was really windy offshore. The light, I couldn't even see what my priority was, but I just knew that I had like gotten, okay, 2 waves to survive, because based on watching the other guys, I don't know if they got the score, but I can't focus on them. I'll find out when I get to the beach. And it was when I got an okay wave that I thought might have been a 5, but I ended up getting a 3 for some reason. And, that's just judge sports also. It was both Mason Ho, who actually found a barrel out there at the end bowl somehow, got a barrel, 7.5. That puts him to first above me. I'm still in a really good second. And then Kieran Jabor gets a really good wave. He ended up tearing 3 turns into it, and there was nothing I could do. And you're only as good as the wave allows you to be. And I felt like if I had better waves, it wouldn't have mattered what those guys did. But that's surfing Sunset Beach. So I think maybe I got a little bit unlucky. Looking back on the footage,
that was super unlucky.
Looking back on the footage, I think I could do better surfing for sure, but I always think that. But the board, that's the craziest thing. That board, like the 6.6 felt like a 6.0, and my 6.4 felt like my shortboard. Actually, I went surfing this morning with you, and I rode my shortboard, one of my first shapes that I did, and it's amazing what I learned so much from these new step ups that I could bring into the smaller wave boards. I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I could surf better on my step ups right now, because the evolution of the shaping's gotten better. And also I've learned a lot about everything it has to do with shaping, because now I'm finally on maybe my 20th shaped board. So we'll see what happens when I reach my 100th, because everyone has to be a little bit better.
Yeah, I think I need to order one of your step ups. The step up I rode in the contest wasn't, my downfall in that, I lost horribly first heat, and the main reason is because I don't know how to surf Sunset. I've probably surfed out there like 5 times, and I just didn't know what waves to go for. I was getting smoked the whole time. When I did catch a wave, I didn't have the right fins. I think the board was sort of an old hand-me-down from Imai, and he's way bigger than me. So I didn't do myself any favors for that event. It was good to be out there.
Yeah, you didn't have really any training for it, and I feel like Sunset, it's all about experience out there, or getting extremely lucky, or it's the best it's ever been, and you also get really lucky.
Yeah, and after that heat, I was questioning myself. I was like, I don't know how to surf anymore. Like, I couldn't even turn. And then we went
Sunset.
And then we went and surfed the other wave, and I got to ride my 6.4 that's more made for me. And I was like, I probably should have just rode the 6.4. That's probably would have been too small in those conditions, but I was able to surf it a lot better.
It was too big for that, but at least that 6.4 was made for you.
Yeah.
So it fit you better, and Imai's probably got 25, 30 pounds on you. So
I know, it just doesn't make any sense.
But it's crazy because I wasn't bummed. I was your caddy, and I wasn't bummed at you because I was already watching your board and how it was working for you. And I know from experience, because I've had horrible heats out there as well, where you feel like you know how to surf, and then you question it all because the board doesn't allow you to do what you want to do. And so when I went to shape my 6.6 and 6.4 for this event, I basically was like, I know what I need to make the most forgiving, easy to turn anywhere, fastest board possible, which is hard to combine a lot of those things. But I somehow was able to pull it off, and I definitely was questioning it. I was like, I should probably bring some of my boards that I know have worked out here. But then I tried it at Hokipa, and I was like, it feels pretty good, I'm just going to, you know what, screw it. I'm going full commitment. I'm just like, I'm riding what I'm going to ride, and if I lose first heat, I'll at least know what was wrong with it. I can make it better. But it's just funny because how much of a difference a board could make. And, we surf so drastically different. I don't know. It'd be interesting for you to try them. You might not like it, but I mean, at the end of the day, that's the thing is like, I'm not a shaper shaping for other people. I'm shaping exactly for what I need. And that's I would say the plus as to shaping my own boards right now is that I can make what I need. I think
for sure
you have to be a little more Jedi Master black belt to be able to like identify what another style of surfer is and shape something for them to love it. And it's actually quite impressive that these shapers can have such a giant roster like KT surfing and a lot of the North Shore shapers. They have such a big crew that surf completely different, and they can somehow make boards that work really good for them. And that comes with time. And again, I'm not trying to like make and sell boards. I'm just trying to make the best equipment for me to ride. And I guess if you like it enough, I could probably replicate it.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's hop into some of these questions now. Let's see. Tao now asks, Mont Alai this year, you think? Is this going to be another 20-year swell, you think, this year, Kai?
Well, unfortunately, we just finished the summer, and Mont Alai really loves straight south swell. So anytime Tahiti goes code red, there's a 50-50 chance it'll get into Mont Alai. And now that we're in winter, there's not going to be a chance unless there's some weird storm system that makes Tahiti 100 feet. Possible because Ian Walsh back in the day, might have been, was it 2000? What year was that ridge? Was that not 2004 or something? No, it was a little later, right?
No, it was later. It was like
2008?
Something like that.
Something like that. He
2000s.
caught like one of the biggest waves ever ridden down there, and that was the same swell that actually was a small Mont Alai swell, but it happened in November 1st.
It's possible for
so
sure.
it's possible to get those swells, but Mont Alai won't break likely until between the months of May to like August. Like that I would say is like the most likely window. And it has to fit in between 3 islands, Maui and Ko'olawe and Molokini. And I think Molokini's 2 miles offshore from Maui, 4 miles round trip if you're stand-up paddle race training like I used to do. And then I think it's about 4 miles across to Ko'olawe. And there's that tiny little passage that the swell has to make it through. So if it's a degree off, and that swells have to come from like, they have to start by Tasmania, go past New Zealand, and send swell up to Tahiti. And so it has to travel 10,000 miles, I feel like, just to get like to Maui. And if it hits that perfect, so it hasn't broken 17 years until 2022.
Well,
right?
Yeah, everybody on Maui knows the years that it broke since basically we were born. It was 2005.
Yep.
2011, 2022.
But 2011 wasn't like 2005 or 22.
It was borderline above that 6 foot mark. But essentially, 10 foot days out there, which is the firing ones. I'll put it on the screen when I edit this thing. But the ones where guys are standing in it, if you can be on Maui for 10 years and never see that. Dude, that's the heavy part. And it's the best wave. I think we can go on record and say it may be the best wave on Earth at that size.
100%.
I can't imagine a wave being better than that.
When that wave was breaking that day, there was no wave on Earth, and I could bet the house on it that was that good, because you've never seen... It was Kelly Slater's wave pool, but 10-foot Hawaiian with 10 wave sets. 10 wave sets! And I think the reason why that was happening, I spoke to legend Ian Walsh about this too, because he was doing a lot of free diving in the years prior to this. He was trying to find a place to dive more than 200 feet. And he ended up diving all of that basic basin between, the huge bay of Mont Alai all the way to Ko'olawe, to Lanai, to Molokini. And there's only one trench that's 200 feet deep. The rest is like this flat sort of ground that is 100 feet deep. So it's 100 feet deep for miles all the way to that entrance. Right. And I think what happens, and if you see this is Indonesia to a T, the best waves on Earth have islands that are really close to it, and it massages the swell in and it grooms it. So Mont Alai wouldn't exist, I think, if those islands weren't there. But those islands block a ton of swell, so it'd break more if those islands weren't there now. It's like it needs to come massage, and then it hits that shallow and it stacks. It slows down and it stacks on each other. So what would be a 3-wave set stacks into maybe 10. And I was catching a wave at Mont Alai kicking out, and you'd see literally 10 10-footers just grinding.
It's the most perfect waves you've ever seen,
and
too.
Not one was out of shape. It was just perfect. And no like weird section, just barrel.
That reef sits with basically no waves over it for years sometimes.
Yeah,
so
years.
It becomes, it just can stay perfectly razor edged. Like maybe
it
if it was
the
huge all the time, it would rip apart the reef. If it was big all the time, it probably wouldn't be as
There was
perfect.
chunks of reef ripping up that day.
Yeah.
And the water,
how
there was
itchy everybody was?
Well, there was all this silt from like 20 years of it, or 17 years of it just collecting down there. and all of that got turned up, and it made your skin crazy itchy. I ended up wearing like a long arm, short leg just to keep it off my skin, and I was still like, you're
trip.
itching like you know, you're a crackhead on the corner of a street. Like, it was pretty bad. But I was just like, this is a once in a lifetime thing. Hopefully not once in a lifetime thing, but you can't not surf from sun up to sundown, because this is an opportunity you won't get maybe again.
Yeah, it was, everybody that was there that day knew that it was as special as it gets, and it's every person from Maui's dream to get that. And there was that end of the day on the first day when you got pretty much a 12-footer. I'll put it up, but I remember there was probably 1,000 people watching on the beach.
Oh yeah,
everyone came from around Maui to watch, and it was like, it sounded like you scored a touchdown in an NFL game when you came out of that barrel. I haven't seen it outside of a contest like that ever, where it's just a free surf session. It felt like there was just this crazy energy where people were just losing their minds every time someone came out of a barrel.
Everyone knew how special it was. And
I know.
I surfed 2 days in a row, each day 10-hour sessions. 10 hours each day.
Crazy.
And the second day, I hit the reef really bad, and I basically had to get 5 stitches in the top of my foot, but thank goodness it was the top of my foot. I ended up surfing with an open, flapping wound on the top of my foot that was probably like, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch deep, like a big chunk, almost to the top of my bone. But it was so good, I just couldn't go in. I was like, frick, I might lose my foot after this. I might get some flesh-eating disease. But I'm like, it was like, do I go in? I would totally have regretted if I went in. So I was just like, okay, God, just make sure I don't lose my foot, and I'm just going to surf. And I just tried to ignore the fact that I had a chunk of meat on the top of my foot. And the scar, it healed really good. But I was like, thank God it was a second day, but the waves were so good. I was like, I was cooked. I haven't been that cooked after surfing than some of the early days paddling out at Jaws. Like, eyeballs felt like they're going to fall out, lips. I even had sunscreen in my thing. You couldn't put enough on. It was just,
because the spray would just peel off every bit of sunscreen you put on.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, that was
sick.
10 out of 10 day. I could talk all day about Malaya.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move it over to Mavericks, looks like. When you surf Mavericks, do you venture to other waves in northern/central Cali?
Well, I think when we go out there, our goal is usually Mavericks. It's, 30 minutes from the airport, so it's pretty nice. You can land early in the morning and still get there right at light to go paddle out. I don't like doing that. Ridge, you don't like doing that because it feels a little disrespectful to the spot, because it takes every ounce of your being to not drown there.
Oh, yeah.
Even with the inflation stuff, it's such a heavy wave. I think
the last time we were there, we were everyone was saying the wind was going to come up and ruin it, and we were actually wanting to go drive and see the mystical ghost trees, which you're not allowed to tow it. There's no jet skis allowed there, but I think it was huge that day.
You can't even paddle it really, because there's no thrill crafts allowed in there. You can have a cruise ship in that, Monterey Bay, but you can't have, God forbid, a thrill craft for water safety on an 80-foot swell.
Oh,
so sometimes when we go, we hope we can just go and watch it, but it's right on the rocks, and if you're paddling and you don't have water safety and you fall, you probably die.
100%. It's pretty wild.
It's more of a tow and surfing spot than a paddling spot, I think.
Yeah, and that wave has potential it has gotten bigger than Mavericks. It's the biggest wave in the coastal California, and it's wild that it probably may never be surfed again on a huge day.
Talking about like Mavericks, for example, we go to Mavericks, kind of near there, nothing comes close as far as the height of a wave. I mean, I know there's probably some secret spots in the California coast that are really big, but you're not allowed to like film there or talk about it. And, out of respect, you kind of just let those guys have it. But when we surf Mavericks, we usually get Mavericks on the really big day. And then, one trip we had, which was really fun, was with Ian Walsh there. Ian Walsh, he's always here. It was you, me, it was you, Ridge, myself, Ian Walsh, and then our filmer buddy, Mark Chambers, Maui Mark. And we were convinced we had to go on a dumpling, or we were on Ian's schedule. He took us on a dumpling tour through San Francisco, Ocean Beach, And this was the day after. Pretty much the best thing to do after surfing Mavericks the next day, if you have the stamina and mental fortitude, is go to 12-foot Ocean Beach, and it's like Puerto Escondido. Not quite as maybe perfect, but like there's certain parts of that beach that can get so good. But you got to really want it because you have to be willing to literally dive through 50 waves to get out.
Right?
50 waves to get out. But the current's so strong, it'll suck you out.
Oh, so I never surfed it.
So like crazy. You get pounded, but if you keep persistent, because you have to ride a bigger board when it's big like that, like 7.6, 8.6, because the wave is a big wave, 12 foot, but it's like a lot of water moving. It's a lot of great whites. I mean, every time I'm out there, I come in like, hey, did you see that great white? I'm like, I'm glad I didn't. And so you get pounded, but the current's so strong in these rips that it'll keep pushing you out while you're getting hit by waves. So you're like kind of making progress, get pushed all the way in, make progress. And if you don't have a hood, your brain is just frozen. You need a hood there because you're spending so much time underwater. And if you can get one psycho wave out there, it's so worth it. And on this particular day, we just watched kegs go off while eating dumplings on the beach because we were all smoked after not trying to drown at Mavericks.
Yeah, a lot of times it's not just that you're physically burned out after those big wave days. For me, at least, I'm sure it's the same for you. It's more like the mental
There's a mental toll.
Because your body, I feel like, goes into such survival mode that it releases everything it's got as far as the adrenaline, the dopamine, everything that it's trying to do to keep you alive. And then the days after, you're extremely deficient in all of those. And I always just feel so out of it. I just want to be in a dark room and just sleep for 2 days after.
Yeah,
it's hard to motivate. I don't know how.
In cold water too, though, cold water, it's just hard to motivate to put on that wet 5mm wetsuit, booties, sometimes gloves, and go paddle out in the fog and be like, okay, well, I hope I don't get whacked by a great white right now.
Yeah, it's not that motivating, is it?
You got to really want it.
I like this question. As a multidisciplinary board sport athlete, which water sport do you think has the most room for progression?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think we're witnessing like wing foiling right now is just going absolutely psycho, and that's because it's brand new. It's only been around for a couple of years, and kids are doing 1080s, 1440 spins on that, and I feel like the foil's constantly getting better too, just for the wave riding aspect. You're able to lean over more and kind of have it become more of an extension of surfing and less feeling like a foreign sensation. It feels like you're just flying on a cloud, but it requires a similar surfing stance now. And it's all based on the foils that you want. So you can get a more front foot pressured foil or one that is quite equal pressure, even a back-footed foil, which most surfers tend to actually like more because surfing is more back-footed. I think big wave surfing, no matter what, always has a lot of room to grow. And the reason why is because you don't get to do it that often. So those big leaps and bounds are very limited to 5 days a year when the waves are really big. And it's not only when it's big, but when it's perfect, because we'll have sessions out at Pe'ahi that, the week before you're getting barreled every wave and you can rip turns and it's so forgiving. The swell interval is a little shorter. So you're able to like really push it to the limit. And then, but then the next session, it's pure survival. You could barely bottom turn because it's bumpy and you want to get barrel, but it's not quite barreling and you feel like you just regressed. And so I would say probably on the toe and surfing side, because there's no limits what you can do. It's just how much courage you have to try it. I don't know, Ridge, what else? Do you think of any sport that could really go next level?
Well, I think as far as the sports we do, I'm kind of looking at it from the perspective what sport maybe has gotten close to its ceiling of progression with current equipment. And I instantly think of maybe shortboard surfing and the airs.
True.
Like, guys can do really nuts airs nowadays, but it's gotten to such a level that, say, a 720 is the top trick to land. And our friend Jackson Bunch just stomped one. I think he maybe was the
11th.
What did Stab say? The 11th person
ever
to do it
without
ever?
straps.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm leading to is that sport, that specific niche of the sport, shortboard surfing, feel like can go up a ton in progression if there is maybe some adaptation to the equipment. And that's where maybe the straps come in. And we saw Matt Miola bring out he's the best aerialist in the world. I think a lot of people can agree with that. He brought out the straps at that Swatch Nines contest at Waco. And that was when I was like, yeah, it's so sick to see, because I think he can see it too, that he's done maybe all that is physically possible on current equipment. So now maybe he's looking at the foot straps and being like,
well, I think
I could do a double backflip maybe, or something crazy. But yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
I think Matt knows it. Most people that aren't, I would say, super tuned in to professional surfing, or even participating in it, wouldn't understand. But strap surfing isn't surfing. It's its own discipline. Although it does resemble surfing, because you're just riding a surfboard with not holding on to anything. But I think you gotta like treat strap surfing differently. Like, we're not, every time we land a crazy air, or Matt or whoever's into the straps, it's not like trying to outdo what's done in surfing. It's just, of course you have the ability to do something a little more inverted and land something every time and spin double every single time you hit. But that being said, it is a little bit different, because when you're doing an air surfing, you scoot your feet all the way forward and you end up riding the middle of the board in the air and you land very forward. And it's really, the rotations are very different in strap surfing, because you are always on the tail. You're always strapped to where your like comfortable turning stance is. And so when you're in the air, you have all this extra nose, and it's a different type of surfing. And I like to think of it as just something completely separate. It's not like, oh, look, I did a 720 first ever in surfing, It's like, no, it's like, this might be the first thing in strap surfing. But I think when you have Matt Miola's, Aaron Brooks is really into riding straps from time to time. Italo Ferreira, world champ, is really into riding straps at home. I think they treat it as just something fun to do. It's like taking out your fish board and playing around on it, or it's just going on a stand-up paddle board. It's just different, and I think
keeps it interesting.
I think the more these amazing athletes do it, the better the sports can get pushed, because right now it's just, there's so few people strap surfing.
Yeah, it's an incredibly niche thing for sure, but it is such a separate thing. But at the same time, you have these top level aerial normal surfers. They can get on a strap board and they just have to figure out the mechanics of it, and then they can immediately start pushing super hard with it. So just for the I'm not saying like surfing should go in that direction. Like,
I think they should do expression sessions at CTs where, here, boys, girls, here's a bunch of strap boards. Yeah. Like, we'll just do an expression session. Winner gets 10K or something. Go do some backflips.
It would just keep it fun.
Well, isn't that the point of surfing? I feel like,
it's easy to get too wrapped up in the purist sort of mindset sometimes.
When you have so many rules for something, it just takes away the fun, because there's no like wiggle room. It's like, I have to try to fit in this box, and we've heard that a million times, but that's going to my shaping. I learned enough from Keith and YouTube to like make a board. I wouldn't say I'm a master shaper by any means, but I know what I want, right? And I've really focused on not trying to like use my base start as something from someone that already made something. So I'm not like looking at a board and being like, I'm going to copy the touching point, the rocker, everything, and then I'm going to go from there. And the outline, it's like, okay, I really want this to be borderline on artistic expression, but also in my own freedom where there's no boundaries. What do I think looks like the best board possible? And it's funny because sometimes they come out and then I'll compare them to like my just typical perfect shortboard or step up that's been refined over years. And they look completely different, but they still look sick. They just look different. And there's a different feeling. There's a different sensation when you're touching it in the water. And I think that's just like other sports or just like most things. You can't start with rules and then try to break them later on. I think you just got to like forget it all And then as you sort of progressively get better, you can reference things. Like I'll still reference my board, be like, my best up had, 2.5 inches of tail rocker and, 5.5, 6 inches of nose kick rocker. But that's all I need to sort of know to be like, okay, I'm in the ballpark. And then I might go crazy and be like, I'm going to throw in 6.5, almost 7 nose kick. And then I might keep it at 2.5 or might even go less, like 2. So the balance of the board is different. And I think that's the best way to approach everything is you get to a certain point and you just sort of let it all go.
100%. All right, rapid fire here. What is your biggest wave? You go first.
Biggest wave successfully recorded by Big Wave Awards was 70 feet. I kind of don't believe it though, because the year before I got a 70-foot wave out at Peahi, Jaws, and then I got in 2020 another big wave, that big right at Nazare, and when I measured 2 waves together, those two comparatively, there was a 10-foot difference. Like, if I was trying to like do it in Photoshop, huh?
I don't know what they did to measure that right, but that was so much bigger than 70 feet.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying is I won the year in 2019 with biggest wave of the year, 70 feet, and then I won 2020 with another 70-foot wave, and I'm like, wave is 10 feet taller than my Jaws wave, like. And so I would say my biggest wave so far is about 80 feet because it's literally 10 feet. And they don't tell you how they measure it. They have scientists and professionals now, but they really don't tell you how they do it. And I don't know if you could ever measure a big wave properly or easily. I think you need, radar off a drone to be bouncing a signal off the water. I think that's probably the only way because when you have a lens, it can either make a wave look bigger or make a wave look a lot smaller. And I think the lens, most of the time, make waves seem smaller. Because in person, you look at it and you're like, that wave's as big as a skyscraper in, New York. Or if you're walking down the street, you see a 10-story building, and you're like, I feel like I've seen a wave that tall before and that wide. But then it gets measured and it's only 50 feet, the wave, and I don't know. I digress.
Yeah, and that some of the other waves that have won the biggest wave at Nazare, they're kind of big slopey peaks. Mm-hmm. That thing was 80 feet tall and about 70 feet wide in the barrel. Do you think, looking back, do you wish you would have just kickstalled under that thing and tried to pull in?
The problem was with that wave is that it was the most untraditional wave. That was the weirdest way to ride the biggest wave you've ridden. Okay, so it wasn't like we're waiting out the back and a wave's coming in and we get towed in and then you have all this time to set up. I was getting towed out after being towed into a smaller wave, like a 40-foot wave, and I was towing out and we saw this thing wedge, and at Nazare, the biggest waves are 2 waves that come together. It's the rogue wave effect. Basically, one wave comes this way and it hits, and we could see that happen. You can only see it when you're facing outward, like you're facing like the wave. But when the wave's coming in, you can't see it from the back. Okay, so you could hear the girls in the background. Yeah. But they want to be on the podcast. We should get them on at one point.
We should, yeah.
But so I got towed in at the wave. I got towed in up the wave at an 80-foot wave or whatever. And so I basically faded as long as I could get away with before I had to turn straight down the wave. Because at one point you have to start turning to make it down that hydraulic of water going up the face of the wave. Otherwise you'll get stuck in the lip and go over the fall. So I knew it was going to barrel. I just couldn't get deep enough. I was like, fade, 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 fade. Okay, I got as deep as I could get before I had to start dropping in. I dropped in straight and tried to eke my way to the left, and the wave was like an interesting sensation because when I was riding it, it felt big and it looked scary, and I did ask myself, what would have happened if I had fallen right there? But when I kicked out, Lucas Chumbo, who towed me in, was like, that wave was huge, and I was like, oh, it was a good one. You're like, good, we got another score. It didn't feel like massive. It didn't feel massive, really. And then I got back to the boat ramp, and one of the photographers comes running down, and he shows me the photo, and he's like, and I'm like, who is that? I literally said, who is that?
It looked photoshopped.
it looked fake. And I was like, that's me? There's no way that's me. And I had already gotten a psycho photo from Mike Coots out at Jaws for the winning wave in 2019. So it was really weird. And that one looked photoshopped too because of the angle and the wave was huge, And so it was just like, I was just like, wait, what? I didn't realize that I had ridden that size of a wave because it would happen so fast. I literally got towed in from the shoulder and tried fading into it. And of course, if I had been, in a normal position, you could have seen what was going to happen and pulled in and gotten the biggest barrel ever. But
I think you would have gotten exploded. That barrel was not rideable. I was kidding before.
I'm lucky.
Ate itself, I think you did everything perfect.
I tried doing a turn afterwards because I was like, okay, I'm going to get, I went straight on this wave. They'll probably give me a 3. Maybe I can bump it up to a 3, 5, or 4 because at Nazare, they're so funny. The judging's wild. Like you can do a flip air 360 down a wave where you're watching the lip break as you're facing backwards in the air, land it, whitewater hits you, kick out, and they're like, Kai Lenny, your last wave is a 3.5. And I'm like, wow, that was like, I thought I was going to die. That felt like a 9.
Jeez. Yeah, I think, let me think. My biggest wave was definitely the Jaws wave. I think I measured it around 70 feet or so. But like you were saying, when you're on the wave, you have no idea how big it is. And our conversation with Rush, he was talking about it too. When I was asking him what his biggest wave was, you're kind of just so focused on making it and you're just locked in that you don't realize. And it's the same thing. When I saw the clip, I think one of our friends pulled up the clip that night and I was like, geez, all the fear hit me right then. I wasn't even scared that much riding it.
Sometimes the tallest waves though, like the tallest waves, the ones that have the most impact on photos and video and people's, idea of big wave surfing, sometimes they're not the easiest, but they're not the most scary. I've had waves, you've had waves that are like half the size that feel way bigger because a photo and video can't measure the energy that each wave has. And sometimes the tallest waves, like, yeah, it has a lot of energy, but it's just different. And sometimes the smaller, most compact ones have more power in them. I don't know what it is. And then you're like, oh, that was crazy. And you're like, that was all? Like, I'm nervous now. What if I ride a bigger one?
And it's also that the biggest waves are typically the ones that really apex, maybe more at the peak. Like Jaws, it's the North Peak. And those, it's basically a straight, you just bottom turn and you made it, essentially. The most challenging waves are maybe the ones that are half that size, but have a really stretched wall and are really technical where you need to high line and do everything perfect to make it around the section or pull in.
Yeah.
And those are more, to those that know about big wave surfing and surf big waves, those are the more challenging waves and the ones that I guess are more rewarding. It's not insanely rewarding to ride a huge big peak until I guess you see the photo after and you're like, oh wow.
I mean, it's
fun.
Cool.
It
it's its own
really
thing.
Big, but,
it's its own thing. Like on the big peaks, like at Nazare, when you're riding those types of waves, it's really point and shoot. I mean, you could do a chop hop, but it's so big and you're going so fast. You're like, maybe not. I feel like, sometimes the best waves are the ones that really hit the reef or the sandbar and have like a wall to them and are really performance. Because you said it, sometimes the biggest wave, all that energy has to go to making the wave tall, and it doesn't necessarily have the biggest wall. Because all that, if it had a big enough wall, it would probably be a smaller wave because that energy would be dispersed versus like concentrated in one area just going vertical. And anyway.
Yeah. Let's see. I think we have time for one or two more questions. Let's pull up. Let's see. Lee Wieland asks, I was wondering if you knew any good coaches that could help one progress toward big wave riding and or any thoughts of a plan of development. So I guess just looking, say you're a surfer and you're getting used to 6-foot waves. What does that path to going XXL look like in your eyes? And I guess I'll go first. My perspective is it really is about baby steps, I would say. Mm-hmm. You don't want to find yourself in a massive jump where the biggest wave you surfed is 6 feet and then all of a sudden you're going out to 30-foot Jaws. That's a pretty shocking jump to make. I would say the years that it takes to slowly go a little bit bigger in like 10-foot increments is going to teach you everything you need fundamentally of what you need to do to prepare, how you approach these waves, how you ride them. And then as far as having a coach, I mean, I guess it could help, but the best coach is the ocean and just going out and doing it and getting used to it. But what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, you're dead set. It's one of those things. It takes baby steps, and the answer doesn't really reveal itself until, it does in a way. So you start surfing 6-foot waves, you figure those out. You go to 10-foot waves, you figure that out. And along the way, you're developing your equipment. You're understanding what works for you. You're picking up some safety stuff, whether it's impact vest, inflation vest too, if it's really big. And I think it's also a lot. You start meeting people out in the lineups as it gets bigger, and picking their brains on their approaches, because everyone has a similar approach, but they have different ways of doing it. If you're really new to it and you're trying to learn a lot quick, doing one of the brag courses, Ridge, you should probably just throw up the link too in the description. Yeah. But the brag courses are insane because it teaches you about safety on the jet ski, the right way to drive the jet ski in the lineup, how to read these giant waves, knowing the danger zone. So is it zone A, B, or C, which are pickup areas. And it's sort of flying an airplane, a small airplane, or even a helicopter isn't that hard. It's doing all the classwork before that is the hard part. It's understanding the language. And I feel big wave surfing in the past, you were required to have experience and spend years and years of baby steps, getting incrementally riding bigger waves, maybe going to the North Shore of Oahu and starting off for your first big wave session at Sunset Beach when it gets really big. And that's fine because you can paddle out, you can ride a big board. It's big waves, it's gnarly, but there's quite a few people out there. There's a lifeguard. And then eventually you graduate to Waimea Bay. And through those experiences, you start learning the terminology between everyone, the language. You kind of understand the landscape, right? But brag is really good because it teaches you do a 2 or 3 day class. I think it's what is it, $600, Ridge, to do that course?
Yes, it's whatever it is. And if you're serious about getting into big waves, I would say it's almost a must.
Yeah, for sure.
The more people that do that class, the safer everyone's going to be. I definitely recommend
in-person class. Yeah. You can do an online version. I think they have an online version, which is maybe good to start off with. But what you're going to realize, to get into big wave surfing, it does cost a lot of money. You have to pay for jet ski water safety. You have to pay for boats to get to some of these waves. Airplane tickets. Each board, if you get a deal, is $1,000, or they're $1,200 usually. These big wave guns, because they're so much glass and they're a lot of work to build actually. And so, you kind of have to be willing to pay up, to get to it. And a lot of people that aren't sponsored will, usually work all summer long so they can big wave surf all winter long. And it's pretty hardcore, and I tip my hat to them. But, if you're the top of the crop of big wave surfing, someone like that could be spending up to $5,000 per swell just on safety teams, having the right people there. And then, of course, if you're trying to make a career out of it, you have to hire filmers, and that all just sort of adds up. And it's totally worth it. You can take the school of thought of I'm just going to paddle out, but it's kind of in these levels of big waves, it's very frowned upon by the legends, by pretty much everyone, because you become a liability for someone else to save, and then they risk their life. And, the saying that Brian Keaulana always said, he's one of the legendary water safety guys, the OGs from Makaha. He basically says, you can rush into a situation where someone is drowning, but if you rush in, now 2 people are drowning. So learning when to go and when to wait. That's what you learn in that brag class. So I recommend, if you want to get more into big waves, it doesn't have to be 80-foot waves, but any big waves. And I consider a big wave 12-foot Hawaiian or bigger, which is 25-foot faced wave or bigger, that becomes big wave surfing. Yeah.
And it's important too, just to never underestimate any waves, of that size.
How do you spell? Real quick. Sorry. It's an acronym, BRAG, for Big Wave.
Big Wave Risk Assessment Group is what it's called, for those that.
So BWRAG. Oh.
Yeah. So yeah, if
you're typing
if you're
it in.
interested in it, even if you're not big wave surfing, it's insane skills to know too. It's a lot of CPR.
Yep.
It's basic life saving stuff.
How
if you're a
to
surfer,
bring someone in if maybe they drowned and they have and you don't know if they have a broken neck or not. How to carry them in. You can do an online course to see if this is what you want to do.
Yeah. Totally. All right. I think that's all we got time for today. So thanks to everybody that was in the stream. I'm going to download this, put up an edited version where it's 4K and looks really nice, and put some clips. So if you want to check that out, that'll be up hopefully by tomorrow morning. We'll see. But yeah, thanks everybody for watching. Kai, do you have any final words to send us off?
No, thank you to everyone who's participating, and we'll see you the next time. Looking forward to it.